Poirier came out and he said that he has offered or even agreed to fight Nate Diaz a number of times. He's now calling out very aggressively, by the way, Colby Covington. My biggest takeaway is that Dustin has made up his mind that he's going to be a 170-pounder. I don't have any other evidence. That's all I've got. Dustin has been very active on social media, as you guys have seen, but then he even sat down and did a full interview. He talked exclusively about two guys, both of which are 70-pounders, so I think that we have our answer on Dustin. Now, if we don't have it and it's 155 pounds, it is glaringly obvious to me the fight that needs to be made, which is Dustin Poirier versus Michael Chandler. To me, that's the fight, and there's not a whole lot left to talk about. If we are going to 170, let's take a look at this. I like the idea. I would even throw Tony Ferguson in the mix. Regardless of what just happened with Tony, it was an excellent performance. He looked very good. If we're just having this discussion, we're moving a couple of guys up a weight class. It's their first time. I don't hate that idea of Poirier versus Ferguson. Probably not going to get my way, but I'll use that to ease into the idea. Of course, Nate versus Poirier works. Of course it does. And what did happen to that fight? That fight was already signed. That was promised to us. Madison Square Garden. Now, if you guys will just remember how that story went, it was Poirier that pulled off. Nate went through with it. Nate fought at Madison Square Garden as planned. So we know that Nate will do the match. If you're keeping both Nate and Poirier on ice to preserve options for when Conor returns, you'd have some real decision-making at that point. Right? Like if Nate Diaz is in the conversations, if he's on the short list for Conor McGregor at 170, we now know that Conor is going to be at 170, which is where you could insert Poirier at 170. I think at 155 pounds, I personally believe the rumors of Dan Hooker versus Conor McGregor if we're at 155 pounds. But if in fact, we're speculating at best, but if in fact the return of Conor at 170 has to do with Diaz and Poirier and Conor's a 70-pounder, it would change the conversation. And while you're going to have that, and while that's going to get heated, and why one of those guys is going to get matched up, one of those guys still remains on ice. Now, the only idea that I don't love for Poirier, and this is just personal, I don't love the idea of Poirier versus Colby. I don't. Not for your first time. And I was the other side. I wanted Poirier to look, and this is a period of time ago. I'm going back about 3 years, but I wanted Poirier to look at going back to 45. I wanted Poirier to look at Poirier versus Volkanovski at 45. Now, I'm not going to get my way. That isn't going to happen, but I'm just suggesting for you, if I am personalizing it and I wanted Poirier back down here, I can't in good conscience move him up the other direction and then put him with the best guy in the world that isn't named Kamaru Usman. It just seems like a lot to bite off. That story works for sure. Poirier versus Colby works. That is a massive contest for all of the reasons that Masvidal was massive against Colby. That's the exact same story, just gets applied. It gets applied over to Dustin with a few more question marks, with a few more things that are different because it would be Dustin's first time up. I just think that's a lot to bite off. I really don't have standing in this matter. If Dustin thinks that it's not, who am I to say? But if I had a magical wand and I'm doing some special matchmaking over here, I'm not going to put that that's not the one that I'm going to submit for you guys. I like the idea of Dustin versus Nate. I like where his head's at. Dustin versus Conor, of course, makes a tremendous amount of sense. And why the hell not just do it at 170? Dustin doesn't want to pull down to 55. Conor doesn't want to pull down to 50. It's one of those things. Many of us believe that if they are to redo the match, that they would do it at 55, but we only believe that because of Conor going to 70 for Nate Diaz and Conor insisting it be Nate Diaz for the rematch. Like, we think that Conor's got this built-in ideology that carries over as a broad stroke to absolutely everything he does. We've not actually been told that. And I do not love the idea of these are massive stars I'm discussing here. Come on, I threw out Colby Covington's name, I threw out Conor McGregor's name, I threw out Poirier's name, I threw out Nate Diaz's name. These are massive guys that look like they're willing to find each other. They're even willing to make concessions. They're making at least Dustin Poirier is on the weight class. Well, I mean, these are guys that are very willing to get a deal done, to get a fight made. We're going to give them their way at some point, don't we? And if we don't give them their way, it does beg the question of why, which would not involve any kind of conspiracy. It would involve if we knew why, we'd all learn something. We'd learn something about matchmaking. We'd learn something about the business. We'd learn something about the process. But for whatever reason, everybody's on hold right now. And that includes Colby. Colby has not spoken up. Colby has not been challenged by anybody. It was Colby's idea to fight Poirier in the first place. Now Poirier is coming out and said, fine, you know what? I thought about it. I've had a little bit of time. I would imagine that involves some training, some getting used to, some being in the gym with some other welterweights where Dustin finally got the confidence and the decision made that, yes, I can, in fact, go in here. As a matter of fact, I can go with the absolute number one guy. Like, whatever happened there, I would find very interesting. Either way, Colby is getting his way. The idea that Colby had was not met with acceptance. Well, it is now, but now we haven't heard from Colby. So the whole thing gets very weird, right? Like, the whole thing is confusing. I haven't heard one of these guys with a bad idea yet. Conor's never going to let you know what he's going to do. He doesn't want you to know. He has fun with that. But I haven't heard a bad idea from Conor yet. Michael Chandler, I know I'm going down to 55, but he called out 3-4 different names the other night right on TV. I liked all those ideas. I liked every single match and every single name that came out of his mouth. Nate Diaz, anyone, anywhere, anytime, as long as the time could be as soon as possible. I like everything that I'm hearing, but for some reason we don't have enough direction. It's like for some reason we just have too many options. I read a book one time. It all has to do with the problem of choice. I feel like we have so many choices, it gives us something to think about, something to talk about. What that does is it kicks the can down the road and we keep delaying. We've got to start honing in. We've got to start eliminating guys, see who's left, get some guys matched up. What to do with your biggest stars of Nate Diaz, of Dustin Poirier. Where the hell is Conor McGregor? What's Colby up to? Like, I've never really seen a time where we've got better options and better names. It appears to me right now we have too damn many options, which is why no decision is being made.